Very happy Thursday. What a big and busy night I have for you this evening. Lots to debate. Can you know who you think winner and loser of the week is? Nigel Farage joins us a little bit later. In a second, I'll go through what Peter Dutton had to say in his budget and reply speech. It'll be written off as political. It'll be written off as not enough detail. No, it was a statement about values, and the values landed exactly where I think the bulk of the country is. We'll get to that in a moment. But the big news that excited a lot of people today, and I won't lie, me too. We are going to get not one but two debates between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Now, I'm also pleased to say that we have an exclusive for you at the start of this evening's program. In fact, we can cross live to the debate that has still been going on the internet thanks to AI for the past 4 years. This is the internet and what it thinks the debate will look like.
Now, some folks gather around like adorable little ducklings who just discovered their own cute little flappy wappies. It's time to get serious, but still giggle now. We're here to discuss policies, ideas for our future cutie patooties out there. So think about it, my fine feathered friends, while we can enjoy some hilarious escapades from animated kiddos on TV now and then.
And speaking of falling down, Biden can barely stand upright without a teleprompter. The man needs more support than Hunter Biden after a night out with his laptop. Sad.
How good is that? I don't know how they do it, some computer somewhere. But since the 2020 election, they have just been debating back and forth. I think it's on Twitch, one of the social media platforms. No doubt the ones in real life will be even more entertaining and at times perhaps as incoherent. All right. Now, as you know, Jim Chalmers delivered too little too late, and Australians know it in his budget that he delivered just a couple of nights ago. We've gone through uphill and down dale, all of the details from the Goldberg walk, as if he was a boxer going in to fight a main event. Oh, they laid it on oh so thick. Well, tonight was the opportunity for the opposition to reply. Now, one of the great myths and misnomers about a budget and reply speech is that you're supposed to have all of the detail that the hundreds and hundreds of people in Treasury put together for the government of the day, when the reality is it's the leader, the MPs and their staff who are cobbling together what they think should be the response to the budget. But what the budget and reply speech has given every opposition leader for as long as we have all been watching this process, it gives them an opportunity to speak to the country uninterrupted for about 30 minutes. Now, if they give a major speech at the National Press Club, while that's televised, it's not the same as prime time. On Sky News, the ABC and lots of other places, he had the opportunity to meet Australia where it is right now. Because as I've told you for how many months now, Australians believe, in fact half of Australians believe, that we are headed in the wrong direction, that we are on the wrong track. Now that blue line is the wrong track. The red line is the right track. It was very early last year where the right track just pipped the wrong track, but you can see where it's been for now the best part of a year at least. And this is a poll which comes out in the Turnbull Times. This is the data that The Guardian publishes. And it says that 50% of the country believes we're headed in the wrong direction. And that's where Peter Dutton knew that his challenge tonight, be there at an early election or if it goes full term, he'll get another chance next year. It's not just to present yourself as a credible Prime Minister, as a person who can deliver a speech, but it's also somebody who, as I say, understands where people are. And he delivered lots of hits on the existing budget, but he also had plenty of ideas about what would guide him as the Prime Minister of this country. And as a person who's been sitting here every single night with you, looking at how this government promised a big game and then just delivered nothing or went in the exact opposite direction, I thought Peter Dutton's opening was bang on.
Almost 2 years ago, Prime Minister Albanese was elected promising a reduction of $275 each year in your power prices, cheaper mortgages, and that you would be better off under a Labor government. All of those promises have been broken. Today, millions of Australians are struggling to pay their bills. Even going to the supermarket and petrol station has become stressful for so many.
Now, the government will say, well, we say all that stuff too. Yeah, but the government is in the position to do things like all of those excise taxes I've talked about, everything from the taxes on beer and alcohol and tobacco and petrol that are the things the government could do today to make things better. And also, Peter Dutton quite correctly points out that this government is earning more revenue, taking more revenue than any government in recent memory. Yet their spending has also exponentially increased, which is why, if the revenue starts to dry up, we go into deficit, deep deficit. And even the Treasurer was saying that in this most recent budget. But are they going to make things worse with the decisions they have made in this budget? Understandably, Peter Dutton says yes, and who could disagree?
In my 22 years in Parliament, I've seen good and bad budgets, but the budget handed down on Tuesday night is one of the most irresponsible I've seen. The reason interest rates have gone up 12 times is because the government can't control its spending and because of its reckless energy policy. In 3 Labor budgets, the government has lifted spending by a staggering $315 billion, or $30,000 per Australian household.
Now, I was at a mate's place last week and I got the chance to have a chat to my mate's parents. Good people, loyal viewers of this program, they know who they are, shout out. But they were talking that they think that the number one issue in the country is the reality that people can't buy houses. And I've been thinking about it and ruminating about it ever since we had the conversation, because we have to have an actual conversation about something like housing. And obviously, a part of that process is the number of people who are being brought into the country each and every year. Put simply, if there aren't enough houses, but you keep adding more people, well then guess what? At the very bottom end of things, people end up being booted out of their houses, and yes, I'll be talking about that in laborious detail in a moment or two's time. But of course, at the normal and the middle end too, the houses that you want to purchase, you're unable to do so because someone with more money, potentially coming in from overseas, might be able to put up their hand and just blow you away. So I was relieved and intrigued to see that Peter Dutton tonight talked about housing and had some clear ideas in the first couple of years of him being Prime Minister, how it would be easier, ever so slightly, but still, easier for the person you have in your family who you hope will be able to buy a house to actually have an even shot at buying one.
First, we will implement a 2-year ban on foreign investors and temporary residents purchasing existing homes in Australia. Yeah. Secondly, we will reduce the permanent migration program by 25% from 185,000 to 140,000 for the first 2 years in recognition of the urgency of the crisis. Third, we will reduce excessive numbers of foreign students studying at metropolitan universities to relieve stress on rental markets in our major cities.
Now again, compare and contrast the people in the government who say nothing to see here, there's no problem, or the only solution is that we have to take billions of dollars worth of taxpayers' money to go into housing, but that housing, of course, is social housing. Now, I fully support huge investment in social housing because literally the old public housing, the old Housing Commission, as people would remember, in places like New South Wales, the waiting list for it is 60,000 people. So we do need to build that. But for your kids or your grandkids, how are they going to buy a home? Now, I've just off the top of my head talked out loud about ideas that no doubt will be screamed at, but what governments can do is they can firstly take the number of bidders off the table who are competing with your kids at an auction. And we certainly know that there is an awful lot of money, billions of dollars in fact, that is being bidded up by people who are either representing somebody overseas or pretending that the kid here for uni is the one who can actually afford the unit that your kids or your grandkids should be able to have an even shot at. So good, he's levelling the playing field there. Also, crime. Now, there was a lot in his announcement tonight, and I think this was really interesting because he dealt with one of the great misconceptions of Peter Dutton, is that Peter Dutton doesn't get the problems that women face in this country. But also on top of that, he was able to, and of course that's rubbish and garbage, as he spoke about in his speech, his time both as a police officer, responding to domestic violence calls all the way through to the time that he was the Home Affairs Minister, coming up with ways to crack down on kiddie porn. He's always had this as a focus. It will be one of the key focuses of what he will take to an election, and should he become the Prime Minister, a key value, and that's why I say so about politics, it's about values. Value that he would bring to leadership in this country. He also had a couple of very solid, very clear ideas that will rule a line under the types of behaviour that way too many people get involved with. Now, this is not a version of censoring the internet. It's about saying that people who post videos of their crimes in order to get infamy from their crimes should not be allowed to do so.
Australians are unsettled by crime on our streets, ruptures to our social cohesion and threats to our national security. The coalition government will provide much-needed leadership in tackling knife crime. We will work with states and territories to develop uniform knife laws across all jurisdictions, laws which will give police the powers to stop and search using detector wands like Queensland's Jack's Law. Recently, Molly Ticehurst, a 28-year-old mother from New South Wales, was murdered because her violent ex-partner was on bail. Our bail laws need to be tightened in this country. A coalition government will make it an offence to use mobile phones and computer networks to cause an intimate partner or family member fear for their personal safety, to track them using spyware or to engage in coercive behaviours. We will toughen the bail laws and apply to these new Commonwealth offences. There's been an uptick in young Australians committing crimes where they're filming and uploading their crimes to social media. The coalition government will make it an offence to post criminal acts online. Those convicted will be banned from using digital platforms and liable for up to 2 years imprisonment.
That stuff is really important, and that is the role that the federal government can play about the Telecommunications Act, about what you are allowed to do with devices. And at the moment, there are too many people who use their devices and their electronic devices to threaten, intimidate and frankly stalk their partners. Again, who in the country would have a problem if that became law? And while I hope the opportunity is that it's Peter Dutton and his government that would be able to introduce that law, if the government stole the idea word for word and did it tomorrow, I would congratulate them. And if nothing else in a political career, full of many highlights and many tough decisions, this would be a legitimate change for the better. As for the final pitch, the beginnings of an attempt to get the country back on the right track, because of course it's on the wrong track. This was his closing statement.
Are you better off today than you were 2 years ago? Do you feel safer or more secure than you did 2 years ago? When governments change, the country changes. Australians can't afford another 3 years of the Albanese Labor government.
Couldn't agree more. And let's be honest, even some of the most ardent supporters of left-wing politics would have to agree. We've had 12 interest rate rises since this bloke became the Prime Minister. We have seen how many things go exponentially through the roof despite the fact that their promise was that they were going to do something about cost of living. We saw this week that their response to cost of living was to spend billions of dollars in taxpayers' money to not actually improve anyone's life, but to buy them a slogan at an election. If this is a legitimate fight on values, it's going to be a close one. But I certainly believe that the Australian population, while it may change its views from time to time on social issues or the importance of environmental issues, where Peter Dutton was tonight is where Australians have always been, regardless of whether they have been here for many generations or they have just turned up last week. He didn't get into the concept of the fair go, but he did get into the idea about a fair Australia. I think this was a good speech. It was a speech about values. No doubt the bubble within the bubble within the bubble will have its issues, but who cares? They're the gatekeepers of a political generation a long time ago. For anyone else who actually saw the speech tonight, they would see a bloke who is more in sync with them than the Roosters, who are all just about their own power and their own mates in the current government.